So many people come to optimal work because their manager, their internal protective manager, is trying to make sure that they're doing their best. And so the way in optimal work we make use of that energy is by teaching the person then how to see that the path toward working at your best goes along the path of reframing, mindfulness, and quality challenges.
Hey, this is Sharif here with another episode of The Golden Hour, joined by Dr. Kevin Majors. Kevin, good to be here with you again.
Hey, Sharif, thanks for having me back. It's great to be here.
Yeah, well, Kevin, I think we have a great episode up today. We have some good questions to start with, as always. So thanks again to everyone who keeps asking us these great questions, and please submit more. They always fuel a great conversation. So, Kevin, let me just start with what I think is a really tough one, and I share this concern as well. So this person says, actually, I'm paraphrasing. I struggle to limit my internet use. I habitually fall back on it in odd moments. I want to be productive instead. How can I do that?
Okay, that's a great question. So the person saying that he's using the internet too much.
Yeah.
How would we know whether that's the case?
Like, how much is too much?
Yeah, how much is too much? Like, I'd like to know more about like what exactly is the concern here.
Okay, I think I can infer a little bit that maybe it's not that there's too much time is being invested. I don't know if you could ever say, oh, a person should only spend 90 minutes on the internet or something. But I think the point is that this person, and I include myself here as well, do things that aren't productive on the internet, like scrolling through Twitter or scrolling through Instagram, where, okay, this is just not a good use of my time. So doing that at all is too much.
Exactly. So my guess is that the impulse this person has to use the internet is playing some valuable role in the life of that person. So I would approach these things always from like the first standpoint is how can we be understanding of the dilemma that this person has? So on the one hand, there's something valuable that the internet time is doing for him or her. I don't know if it's a man or woman, but that is counterbalanced by, it sounds like, an inner critic, dare I say, that is telling them this is too much. So on the one hand, there's like the good role that they see the resting on the internet doing. And then there's another part of them, which is probably a part that tries to manage their use of time and maybe can be a bit of a taskmaster that is trying to contain the use of the internet. So there are these opposing forces, it sounds like, in the person. Now, both of them are important and make sense. Probably the part of the person that thinks that they need to rest is correct. Yeah, they do need to rest probably from time to time at least. We all do. We can only go 90 minutes or so working before we do really need a break. So I'd like to see, is that part of what's going on here? That the part of them that needs the rest is right. Maybe the way of resting isn't helpful, but at least that need is right. And then part of them that likes to be managing their use of time has a good point too. And is also an important thing that needs to be heard and listened to. But it may use methods of being a taskmaster or a harsh critic that end up making this person feel like they're stuck always in a dilemma in their mind. Do you think that could be part of what's going on?
Yeah. So you're saying they have these two opposing forces, and they both have a point.
Yeah, they have a dilemma.
Yeah. So how do you navigate that then? It's like the part that wants to rest is, yeah, that's valid. You want to rest, but maybe do it in a better way. And the manager. So you're kind of seeing that there are like two people inside this one person.
I think that if you try to be understanding with a dilemma, you're using your right brain, and it's going to see the participants as living, speaking entities, because everything from the point of view of your right brain is alive and is an entity. So just being curious about, like, whenever a person has a dilemma, they can bring curiosity to who's speaking. Who are the interlocutors? In this case, we've kind of identified maybe there are two. Okay, let's hear them out. What's it like when they're fully heard? Okay, that's the first step of being understanding. And it's what you do for people outside of you, and it's what you do internally too. So to be able to like see what is then the next step, what are they afraid of? Okay, so the part of them that says, oh, like, that kind of is pushing them to waste time on the internet. That part you could ask yourself, does it have a fear? And probably there is something it's afraid of, and that thing is a feeling. There is some way that the person could feel that would just seem intolerable. And so this sounds like a strategy for getting rid of a feeling, numbing oneself. And so the feeling could be frustration in work. And so that like whenever the person gets frustrated, then this thing swoops in. Oop, time for distraction. Better. This is what drives addictions. So it is the kind of this response of swooping in to try to put some unwanted feeling back in captivity, like to push it inside. Uh, just out of curiosity, Sharif, what do you think might be the kind of feeling that this person is trying not to feel?
My guess is some type of boredom. I think if I'm putting myself in that person's shoes, that yeah, it's just you kind of want, especially I don't know, maybe you don't like this label of like type A personalities. Maybe that's opening up a whole can of worms, but I think sometimes people, you want to do stuff, you want to feel productive. So it's kind of a paradox. Like you want to feel productive by doing something, so you don't just want to take a break and do nothing. But then it's funny because then the manager is then going to criticize you for actually you're not being productive because you're not doing, you're just wasting time. So I don't know.
Yeah. So it could be then that feeling of boredom really trips their manager into high gear. It's like, oh, we have to be making better use of this time. So that the manager is trying to prevent the feeling of boredom because that's a sign it's failing in its job of keeping them busy. And then this other part of them might be swooping in to take away boredom by entertaining them. But that's only going to make the manager part of them worse, isn't it? And it's gonna be like now they wasted time in entertainment. That's worse than being bored. And then it's gonna swoop in and drive them to work more. You know, my guess is that it's not simply boredom though, that there's something that happens when they're overworked. And maybe it's a feeling of being worn out, overwhelmed, tired, frustrated. There's more to it that it really is for them the trigger for like I need to like dive into Twitter for until my brain feels like it's normal again.
Yeah. Actually, as you were saying that, I started to think, yeah, actually, if I'm thinking of the times when I would be tempted to do that, it would be more like you finish something and then, oh, I have so much more to do. Oh, it's too much. I can't do it all. And then, okay, I just have to watch this.
Yeah. So what parts of us are that are trying to protect us from feelings. Sometimes they're, and this I get from IFS. So Dick Schwartz has these books on internal family systems. And a lot of people have told us that, like, what the talk we've done about how to deal with your inner critic in a loving, compassionate way, and inward cheerfulness and the inward living of ideals. People have, had told me for years that approach is treating the parts within you like they're as if they're kind of entities on their own. And so that's what internal family systems is all about. And I think it's a very interesting way of doing therapy. It can go very deep, very fast. And I think it's kind of implied in a lot of how we talk about things in optimal work. That there are parts of us that are trying to be preventing emotions we dislike or making them go away once they're triggered. So there's avoidance mechanisms and prevention mechanisms, and those they can coincide where it's hard to tell the difference between them. And then there's the emotion, which is the core of the thing the person's unwilling to experience. And helping people to be like open to experiencing whatever the emotion is that they're having at the moment. That the mindfulness of the emotion is how you gently undo these vicious cycles. So if a person could, for instance, get over the fear of boredness or being bored, if the person could let themselves be with the feeling of frustration, they would see that they're much larger than these feelings and that there's a part of them that can feel these things and be perfectly calm and confident while feeling them. That's what the person needs, I think, most to tap into. What is the thing they're so afraid of feeling? Open up, become large, be what they call your true self. Like so that you feel like you are the real you, the full you, the whole you, and then be welcoming of these reactions and emotions.
Okay. Okay. So there was a lot there. So maybe we could step through that again and kind of zoom in on parts that, are extremely confusing. No. So, okay. Just stepping back a little bit. So we started with this thing of entertaining yourself with the internet, distracting yourself in some way. And then your first move was to go to there's this dilemma. You have the part that wants to entertain you, and then the harsh critic who's criticizing you for entertaining yourself. So is that part of like every dynamic that's going on internally, that you have those two parts, and then later you added the third part of the emotion that you're unwilling to experience, that is what that distracting part is preventing you from feeling. So are those three parts are always there. So any kind of internal conflict someone experiences, they can look for those three parts, and that will give them a clue as to what's going on. So you weren't just like there aren't more cases, and you were kind of narrowing it down for this particular
Yeah, and this is
question.
the way IFS describes it: is that you always have protectors and emotions that are exiled. So the protectors either work as managers trying to prevent the emotion from being overwhelming, or firefighters swooping in to make the emotion go back into its prison cell. So somehow to get it out of your consciousness again. The idea is that managers and firefighters may have very opposite ways of doing it. So the manager might be a harsh critic that is a taskmaster. But then you could have a firefighter that's the opposite and is deep dive into distraction. And so they're fighting each other. They make things worse. What I think is, but really and sometimes in the IFS literature they talk about the emotion is really the captive queen bee. These are just the drones. So that these protectors are like drones. They do work, but the queen bee is the emotion that is captured like inside, and that's what they're all kind of trying to make sure stays inside.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that like the real center of gravity here is the emotion, and then you have these managers and firefighters kind of fighting over that. Uh, so how do you okay, so the first step then is kind of understanding, which is interesting that when we talk about coaching people or mentoring, the first step is understanding. So in this sense, you're kind of coaching yourself, or if you're doing this, I guess you do this sometimes in the context of your clinical work. So when you understand someone, you're trying to understand this dynamic at play and understand, okay, what's the emotion that's being exiled, what's the firefighter, what's that behavior,
What's the
what's the
real
manager
challenge?
behavior.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
What's the thing they're really afraid of?
Uh-huh. So okay, then what do you do? How do you proceed after that?
The next part is that okay, so if you can get in touch with both parts of your dilemma, let's say, and then try to be like as understanding as possible with, okay, it makes sense, I'm sure, that both of them are afraid of you getting overwhelmed by some kind of feelings, some kind of bad feelings. Okay, so the next part it would be, what would they what would be their like dream job if they didn't have to worry about that emotion anymore? Okay, let's just posit that, okay, if that emotion were no longer something so fearful at all, then how would they use their particular genius? A very interesting thing is that when, say someone has a very intense taskmaster inside their head, they that taskmaster does have some particular genius. And you have to ask the person, what is it? What is it that could be then utilized for something better that would give, in fact, that part of you even more joy? And when I ask this to people, the typical answers you get are things like, well, it's very good at planning, or it's very good at spotting challenges coming up. So what if it weren't sounding the alarm with every challenge? What if instead it was like helping you to get ready to reframe something? What if it were just on the lookout for challenges to get you excited about reframing them? That I think is how you don't suppress these parts. You don't try to get rid of them or somehow put them into prison within your soul. But what you try to do is to use their energy for a higher end, show them something better. In a way, it's just like in coaching, the next step after being understanding is being encouraging. And this is how you can be internally encouraging to yourself. Show the better way forward that accepts the validity of what this thing is trying to do. So in the case of taskmasters, yeah, they're trying to make sure that you are not wasting your time, you're not letting people down, you're not, I don't know, uh, doing things that make you unacceptable or unlikable to other, whatever it might be. That is really well, okay. All of that genius could be put to a better use, and the same with the parts of people that are helping them to rest. Like what would be the best use of that impulse? And are there any ways of resting that it could get more joy from? And I think a lot of times what happens is people see that there is a part of themselves that can be deeply playful and joyful that they do need to bring into their life more. And that's what they're trying to tap into then. So in all these cases, it's about integrating all of us back into our full self. And then using so that if things have gotten shunted into these vicious cycles, these patterns, that people can get really trapped in vicious cycles of like one part responding to another part and it just gets a life of its own. This is the way to get out of it.
So, okay, so you have these three parts, say in this example we gave based on the question of a person entertaining themselves too much on the internet. So you have the exile, which is maybe the anxiety about or overwhelm feelings or fear of failure or something like that. And then you have the other part that just wants to distract the person with the internet. And then you have the third, that's called the firefighter, right? In this internal family systems framework. And then you have the third part, which is the task manager, which kind of it both wants to manage the anxiety, prevent it from coming out, but also gets mad at the firefighter for wasting time entertaining itself. And it seems like this question is being asked by the taskmaster in a way, like it's coming very much from the perspective of the taskmaster.
And that's exactly, so many people come to optimal work because their manager, their internal protective manager, is trying to make sure that they're doing their best. And so the way in optimal work we make use of that energy is by teaching the person then how to see that the path toward working at your best goes along the path of reframing, mindfulness, and quality challenges. Interesting that none of these parts can on their own reframe. So reframing can only be done by the whole, by the true you, the full you, the real you. So the true self can always reframe because you are the wider context that everything gets seen in. And you're not destroyed by emotions. Emotions are just a part of your experience. It's not the whole thing. So you can learn to experience your emotions for what they are, just as an emotion that, yes, is not comfortable, but neither is it actually destructive of the self. in many real ways, the self is indestructible. The self is like this awareness that we can have where we are not the same thing as our anxiety. We are not the same thing as our thoughts. Those can come and go, but the self stays. The self is permanent. So we have this deeper self. Everything in optimal work is about bringing that true self to work and life. It's about how do you engage in your real life and the challenges there, bringing your full self to them. How do you know that you're like are in that space of being your true self? Well, because you can be curious and cheerful and connected to others with bonds, that you can have ideals, these that you're stretching yourself towards. These deeper things we talk about in optimal work are actually crucial. Interesting that people who are just guided by their taskmasters or managers don't initially see the necessarily the attractive power of that. But at some point people will get this aha moment where they realize that when they really are practicing reframing and mindfulness and quality challenges, how much more joyful and powerful their work is. Yeah, and then how their work brings out the best in them. Because really only the full you can go into flow. Like flow is the most integrated part of our ability to act. So really getting people to work at their best is getting them to work as their true self. But the hard part is these taskmasters, they don't like to let go of the driver's seat. And so they're you have to be patient with them to understand what they're after, what they're afraid of, and then gently show them how to reframe that no, there's a better way of doing this. And so that and in this case, there are ways where your work can make you stronger. And they have to like be able to see that.
Hmm. So when you say show your taskmaster that that there's a better way, and I assume that applies to the firefighter too. It's like, okay, I can see that you want to distract me from this difficult to feel emotion, but really there's a better like something more that you can contribute. Last week we talked about, hey, what can I contribute? Um, so what? How do you show this part of you that is it all kind of going on inside your head, like maybe you do a mindfulness type exercise, you close your eyes and you try to put yourself in the position of this part, as it were. You so how do you go about talking to the part?
Well, we could talk. There are a lot of visualization exercises that can be done, and that can be a really powerful way of doing it. But what I would say here is that it's enough that you get in touch with that concern, the concern of the protector or manager. And from that, you be understanding with it, validating of it, kind of feel the concern that it has, and then try to do the steps of a golden hour so that you kind of bring it along with you on the golden hour. So practicing then reframing this task so you can see what is the real opportunity to go for here. And then practicing some mindfulness, all of that strengthens you, brings you more fully there into the system. Uh, that we do not ever try to just quash these reactions or get rid of them, but you're trying to instead, be in touch with them, connected to them, and then aim using the steps of the golden hour so that you do like bring your full self into that hour of work. So I think that's actually the safest and best way of proceeding because reframing mindfulness and quality challenges always unlock the power of the full self, the true self. And they are in some way profoundly satisfying to managers and exiles. But it's a bit by bit building up. So if people want, they can read books like No Bad Parts by Dick Schwartz, and to see how do you do visualization exercises to deal with them. But I think it's enough that you just see what is the kind of quality I can most practice right now with this part, whatever it is. How could I be more open, more curious, more compassionate towards this? And I think that's enough for the part to feel like, okay, now its concerns are being addressed, it's being heard, And I think that is probably the most important step towards making progress with these parts.
Okay. And then, so this person again, going back, internet use. So this person should go through this process, reframing, mindfulness challenge. Uh, and you think bringing along in particular the manager part or all three parts, or doing it separately with each part? And should they do it in their times of work, or should they do it when this problem is actually going to arise? Like actually when they stop working, that's when they're tempted to
Hmm.
use the internet too much.
Yeah, it'd be hard to give a perfect answer not knowing the person and anything more. All of this is just guessing that this is the kind of dynamic that's there. So I think with this person, when I would want them to, at some point, be attentive to the dilemma within them. Maybe that could be done right before an hour of work, or maybe it's done at some other time of the day. Regardless, the person first has to try to get in touch with, okay, who are the participants in this dilemma, and what is the emotion that they're trying to prevent? How can they practice a new kind of curiosity and openness then to that emotion and to the kind of urges that come from these parts? The sign that the manager is taking charge. Well, in any case, when a part takes over, we experience it as automation. And so it's no longer that we're deliberately acting, it's that we feel like we're in a tunnel and we're acting automatically. That just means that this part has now taken charge. Managers tend to take over at the beginning of an hour of work. That's when you're sitting down and you get this huge drive just to get it done. And so you just aim, and the idea of pausing at that moment to really try to shape this work and do it in a new way, that doesn't speak to managers usually at all. Right. And so the taskmaster is going to try to just push you through that moment. That's where I think doing a golden hour is the best way of addressing the manager concerns, and to show it that, yes, there's an even better way of attaining, the work well done right now. And it's not just trying to push and get it done. It's actually using these steps. So I'd encourage people then to get their manager to pause before they can start an hour of work. I think that would be the linchpin that would change the entire system. So that is, I think, the key moment there. If they then do, say, up to 90 minutes of work and then stop and take a break, I think the firefighter won't need to turn on. So the more, and if it turns on them, they'll only do 60 minutes. So the idea here is that you can prevent the need for that firefighter response to kind of kick in at the end of an hour of work. So take a scheduled break that's truly restful. Try to bring some kind of playfulness there into how you rest, but maybe experiment with other different ways, than just using Twitter or just using the internet in those moments. Go for a walk, be with someone else, talk to people, but have some other kind of completely different path, and it will do the same thing and be more fulfilling. So I think that the golden hour, either, when you start it or when you finish it, the way you really take care of those two moments, I think it does really address these concerns. Probably for the most part, the intense emotion isn't going to come up, and that's fine. Whatever emotion, though, does show up, you can just welcome and be with, and you're big enough to take it in and be with it. And so I think that, yeah, if your work does give you that chance, that there's a big presentation you're giving or something else, by all means, then welcome it, and you'll get energy from it.
Well, Kevin, great. We're basically out of time, maybe even over time. But this was a great episode, and it's great to see this, something we've never talked about before. The parts, the managers, firefighters, exiles, and it's nice to see. I think there's a lot of connections. Maybe we didn't make super explicit, but I think it's there between this approach and right brain, left brain, and reframing and getting the widest possible context. So I think it's maybe something that we'll
We'll
talk
keep
through
talking about,
future
yeah.
problems.
These parts are, just to throw that, but they are all left-brained, and they're all simply habits. The habits that, when your right brain tries to be understanding of them, it will tend to give them narrative and personification. And that's okay because it lets you deal with them in a new way. And it lets you kind of take the energy of this habit and redirect it to better ends. So that's how we heal these things, I think.
That's great. Awesome, Kevin. Well, thanks so much. We'll be back next week.
Thank you, Sharif.
Well, thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Don't forget to check out OptimWork.com for a set of online tools to help you engage challenge in your life. See you next week.